what's interesting too is that since the active duty military force and the Guard and Reserves, it's such a small segment of society, there is a large population that doesn't know anyone connected to the wars. And, when I went to community college after I got out of the Army, like I was typically the only veteran in my classroom, and that led to a lot of interest, a lot of intrigue, but also a lot of sort of exotic kind of beliefs. And I think what's interesting about it too is, when we think about how we honor the military or veterans, it's usually in the span of like halftime, celebrations or flags on the field during the Super Bowl, and then we kind of go back to it. So, Elliot, you're saying that we shouldn't be surprised that there's sort of this consequence where there's a disconnect. But what are the things that civil society does that exacerbates that and makes them worse than if we just came home, went back to work, and didn't talk about our service?
Well, so I think, listen, like I've had asked the question, do you like when people say thank you for your service? And my response is always like, absolutely. Listen, there's someone, and that's someone just reaching out saying, I don't know how to make a connection, but I want to connect with you. So I think that's fantastic. But I think one of the results of the construct of these wars has been the fetishization of the U.S. military, and then people who are outside of the military feeling very uncomfortable about offering opinions and being overly deferential to the U.S. military, which has all sorts of negative consequences when it comes to making policy and our previous panel about how do we deal with veterans. So I think this is really a moment where we should be, as a nation, reflecting on how we got here. Is this the healthiest relationship for a republic to have with this military? Mm-hmm. And I would argue it's kind of not, because we are operating in a sphere of real moral hazard, where also it's become very easy for us in our minds to go to war. We look at the saber rattling in North Korea that we've seen recently, or even with Iran, and it's skewed our perception of what war is. A war, that's a thing that happens over there, and it's done by people who decide they want to go do it, but that doesn't affect me and my family. So I think this is really a moment we should be asking ourselves, if we're going to go to war, do we need everyone to have skin in the game?
And to reflect a bit the diversity of veteran opinions, I personally don't like being thanked for my service. Makes me a little uncomfortable. My passive-aggressive response is to thank TSA agents at the airport for their part in trying to keep us safe. But I think that another tendency that complicates this and doesn't necessarily help is this assumption that veterans are inherently more ethical or moral. Like, we need more veterans in office because they're so ethical and they're going to be able to rise above. I'm like, it's not necessarily true. We do have, service members in prison because they've committed crimes. Like, choosing to join the military doesn't inherently make you like a better human being across all fronts throughout all time. And we do need to really question this, as you call it, fetishization of the military.
Yeah, and sort of like this duality I see, that we're sort of, there's the public and, media, Hollywood, politicians, they sort of reach for two things of way to describe us. It's either the hero, like the lone survivor, lionization of this epic hero, and then once we take off the uniform, it's the downtrodden veteran, the unstable one. And
you're broken.
And broken, and that's sort of infused in like the video we saw, is like this sort of like kind of undercurrent of this trauma that we carry, and maybe we even carry trauma at all, but that's what's supposed of us to do. But